a billionaire, a black waitress, and a boy in leg braces. When 10-year-old Micah Ellison stood up to dance, shaking, trembling, metal braces clinking, no one moved. The staff froze. The guests gasped. And when she took his hand, everything changed. But what if I told you that small act of kindness wasn't random? What if it was part of something far more powerful, something that would expose class, race, and privilege in front of the entire nation? Stay with us, because the moment this billionaire said, "Wait, what's your name?" was the moment the entire restaurant and his life would never be the same. If you're ready for a story that proves one dance can change everything, hit the subscribe button, tap the like, and share this video with someone who still believes in quiet revolutions. The room held its breath. Inside the exclusive confines of Langston Hall, an upscale private dining club nestled in the heart of Chicago's Gold Coast, something unthinkable had just happened. Silence didn't merely descend, it crashed. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Champagne flutes trembled on white linen tablecloths. And for a brief, blistering moment, even the strings of the live piano froze in midair. All eyes turned to the slender space between tables, where 10-year-old Micah Ellison stood trembling. His legs, caged in silver orthopedic braces, shook under the strain of gravity and hope. He looked straight at Raina Carter, the club's only black waitress, and extended a tiny hand. A soft instrumental tune had just begun, an elegant, jazzy lull meant to blend into the ambience, but Micah's gesture pierced through it like a clarion call. The murmur of awkward disbelief had just started to rise when a voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "Sir, control your son." It was manager Delroy Mathers, his tone sharp, cold, and final. "That's inappropriate," he added, stepping forward. "This is not a dance hall, and our staff are not here to entertain children." From the far end of the room, Harrison Ellison, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country and head of Ellison Holdings, stiffened. His hand tightened around the stem of his wine glass. This was the first time he had brought Micah out in public since the tragic boating accident 2 years prior, a crash that had left the boy's lower body partially paralyzed. And from the looks of it, this had been a grave miscalculation. "Micah, sit down," Harrison said quietly. It was meant to sound firm, but there was tension in the undertone, shame wrapped in authority. Raina hadn't moved. She stood frozen, not in fear, but in calculation. Her eyes flicked from the manager to the billionaire to the small boy still holding out his hand, waiting. She had worked here for 5 years. In that time, she had learned how to become invisible, especially to patrons like Harrison Ellison. "Mr. Mathers," Raina finally said, her voice even. "My shift is over." Before he could protest, she untied her apron and folded it neatly onto the tray in her hand. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled at Micah. "I can't dance in an apron," she said. Then she took his hand. The gasp that rose from the nearby tables was not whispered, it was collective. Chairs shifted. One was left untouched. And Harrison stood up so abruptly that his chair screeched backward. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, stunned. Raina met his stare with an unflinching calm. "I'm accepting an invitation, sir." Before anyone could intervene, Micah tried to take a step forward. His foot dragged along the hardwood, the metal of his brace making a high-pitched scrape that echoed across the room. Raina didn't flinch. She didn't correct him. She didn't try to lead. She simply mirrored his movement, adjusting her pace to his rhythm. "She's getting fired tomorrow," someone at the next table whispered. And maybe she was. But at that moment, in that glittering dining hall filled with whispered judgment and trembling crystal, Micah Ellison was leading. And that changed everything. Harrison stood still, as if rooted to the spot. He could barely hear the muttered apologies of manager Mathers behind him. He couldn't focus on the gasps or the scandalized murmurs. All he saw was his son braced and uncertain dancing. A memory crashed into him. Savannah, his late wife, had once danced with Micah in their living room, before the accident. "It's not about perfect steps," she'd said. "It's about connection." Micah's eyes now held something he hadn't seen in years. Not fear. Not shame. Concentration. Pride. For the first time since that horrible day, the boy wasn't being helped, or corrected, or pitted. He was doing something on his own. "Mr. Ellison?" Manager Mathers tried again, gently. "I promise this won't happen again. She'll be disciplined. Thoroughly." The whole room seemed to tense, awaiting the billionaire's verdict. One word from Harrison, and Raina's career would be over. Her dignity obliterated. But he said nothing. The only sound he heard was his son's breath and the soft scuff of metal on wood. After 3 awkward steps, Raina gently guided Micah back to his chair. She bent slightly and said, "Thank you for asking me out." Her tone was formal, elegant, as if she were speaking to a fellow adult. It was an honor. She turned to leave. And then, wait, Harrison called out. His voice cracked with something unfamiliar. Raina stopped. What's your full name? He asked, clearing his throat. She stood tall, holding her tray like a shield. Raina Carter, sir. Harrison repeated it. Slowly, as if the syllables meant something now. As if her name had transformed in his mind from a label to a person. Raina Carter, he said again. He reached inside his tailored jacket and retrieved a small, cream-colored business card. Holding it out to her, he said, my office. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The room, once breathless with disdain, now held its breath in disbelief. Raina took the card. Her face showed no emotion, but her fingers trembled slightly. Micah called out softly as she walked away. Dad? Harrison turned. Why did you do that? His son asked. The question landed like an accusation. Harrison didn't answer. But for the first time, he looked at his son not as a burden or responsibility, but as a whole person. As Savannah's son. As his son. And he realized how little he had actually seen him for the past 2 years. Dinner resumed in a haze of awkward silence. No one noticed the subtle glance Raina cast over her shoulder before leaving. Not a glance of fear or submission, but of resolve. Something had shifted in that room. Something real. And Harrison Ellison knew it. Deep down, so did everyone else. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the gleaming lobby of Ellison Tower, a shimmering monument of glass and steel that pierced the Chicago skyline. Every surface reflected success-polished marble floors, art installations curated by six-figure consultants, and security guards who looked like former federal agents. Raina Carter stepped inside and instantly felt the weight of it all pressing against her skin. She wore her best outfit, a navy blue skirt and a white blouse she'd bought on clearance. Her purse was old, its seams beginning to fray, but she clutched it like armor. Compared to the power suits and designer heels worn by the people sweeping past her, she might as well have been invisible. But she wasn't here to be invisible anymore. Raina Carter to see Mr. Ellison, she said to the receptionist, a young woman with cold eyes and a headset that seemed surgically attached. The receptionist barely looked up, then picked up the phone. After a brief exchange, she said flatly, 18th floor. Miss Corbin will receive you. The elevator hummed upward with eerie silence. Raina inhaled deeply, pushing the nervous tremor in her stomach aside. She wasn't afraid. Not really. She'd faced far worse than a skyscraper full of people who looked down on her. When the elevator doors slid open, a woman in her 40s with razor-sharp posture and stilettos that clicked like threats stood waiting. I'm Miss Corbin, she said, eyes scanning Raina from head to toe in less than a second. Mr. Ellison is in a conference call. This way, please. The hallway they walked through felt more like a runway of judgment than a workspace. Polished mirrors lined the walls, and the click-clack of Corbin's heels echoed like a countdown. Raina could feel the stares from passing executives. A black woman in modest clothes being escorted through the executive offices was a rare enough sight to stir whispers. Then, as they entered a sleek waiting lounge, Corbin asked abruptly, he had you fired, didn't he? Raina turned, slightly startled. It happens, Corbin continued, adjusting her glasses. Powerful clients complain. People like you lose jobs. People like me? Raina asked quietly. You know what I mean, Corbin said. Employees who don't know their place. Raina gave a soft laugh, not amused, but grounded. And where exactly is that? Before Corbin could answer, her phone buzzed. He'll see you now. The office was something out of a Wall Street fantasy, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, custom leather furniture, and silence so thick it had an architecture of its own. Harrison Ellison stood with his back to her, looking out at the skyline like a king contemplating his territory. Mr. Ellison, Raina said formally. He turned, face carefully composed, as if sculpted by restraint. Miss Carter, thank you for coming. He gestured to a seat in front of his desk. Please. Raina sat down, setting her purse gently on her lap. The silence that followed was not awkward, it was strategic. The kind designed to make the other person speak first, to fill the void and reveal something. She didn't take the bait. Finally, Harrison broke the silence. Do you have a background? Raina tilted her head. I'm sorry. Education. College. She didn't blink. Bachelor's in Child Development from Northwestern. Started a master's in special education. Didn't finish. His eyes flashed surprise. Maybe. It passed quickly. And now you work as a waitress. I work 3 jobs, Raina replied. The club, a bookstore on weekends, and I tutor whenever I can find students. Harrison nodded slowly, then walked over to a table behind his desk. He picked up a manila folder and returned. "I looked into you, Miss Carter," he said. "I wanted to understand who the person was who danced with my son." He opened the folder and laid it flat. Inside were several photographs of a modest community center, children with mobility devices, hand-painted walls, flyers with a familiar name printed across the top, Liberty Motion. "You co-founded this?" he asked. Raina straightened. "Yes. With my sister, Maya. A dance and movement program for kids with physical challenges." Harrison flipped through documents. "Which is about to shut down due to lack of funding." Raina didn't flinch. "I assumed you'd find all that out." "I thought you'd come here to ask for help," Harrison said. "I didn't," Raina replied. "You invited me." He chuckled. It was dry, brittle. "Fair enough." He stood again, pacing. "I want to offer you a job." Raina blinked. "As a waitress?" she asked. "No. As a therapeutic companion for Micah." There it was. The real reason. Raina noticed the shift in his voice when he said his son's name. It caught just slightly. "I've hired the best specialists," Harrison continued. "Therapists, neurologists, behaviorists. But what you did yesterday—" "It was just a dance," Raina interrupted. "It was the first time I've seen him smile since the accident," he said softly. He met her eyes. "I don't want a dancer. I want someone who can do what you did. Follow, not lead." She looked at him, seeing not the titan of industry, but a father teetering on the edge of emotional collapse. "I'll pay you 5 times what you make now," he said. Raina stood. "No." Harrison looked up, startled. People didn't say no to him. Not in this building. Not in this life. "I don't work for people who see my skin color or my pay stub before they see my value," she said. "And I definitely don't work for people who try to buy solutions to emotional problems." He flushed, red rising from his collar. "You're rejecting a chance to change your life out of pride?" "Not pride," she replied. "Dignity. And because your son deserves more than someone paid to pretend to care." She walked to the door, then paused. "Micah doesn't need more experts. He needs space to lead his own life." "You don't know my son," he said. "No," she agreed. "But I know people like him. And the cages we build around them." She reached into her purse and handed him a card. "Liberty Motion. Classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 p.m. First session's free." And then she left. Outside, Ms. Corbin stared in disbelief. "You just turned down Harrison Ellison," she whispered. "Are you insane?" Raina smiled. "Maybe. But I'd rather be insane than owned." Wednesday arrived with no fanfare, no warning. It was just another chilly afternoon in Chicago's North Side, but something hung in the air, something that felt like a beginning disguised as an ordinary day. At the front desk of Liberty Motion, Raina Carter flipped through a folder of attendance sheets when her sister came rushing in from the hallway. "There's a Bentley outside," Maya whispered, practically breathless, her hijab slightly askew from the sprint. "And you're not going to believe who's in it." Raina looked up slowly, heart skipping. "Micah." Maya nodded. "He's in the back seat. But get this, he's not alone." Raina walked over to the front window. Sure enough, there it was, sleek, black, and polished to a mirror finish. Inside the car, Micah Ellison sat peering out with cautious eyes. In the driver's seat, stiff and unmoving, was Harrison Ellison himself. The billionaire who rarely stepped foot outside his curated world now sat awkwardly parked in front of a rundown community warehouse. "He's not coming in," Maya predicted. "Men like him don't step into places like this." But Raina said nothing. She was staring at Micah, at the way his eyes scanned the unfamiliar building, filled with both curiosity and hesitation. "Don't underestimate the power of a determined son," she said quietly. And then, the car door opened. Micah climbed out first, carefully adjusting the support braces on his legs. His movements were still slow, but more confident than they had been days ago. A second later, to everyone's surprise, Harrison followed, clad in khaki pants, a navy sweater, and discomfort he couldn't hide. The man looked completely out of place. His shoes crunched on gravel as he surveyed the exterior, cracked bricks, a faded mural, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Your rhythm, your rules." He walked behind Micah in silence. "I told you he'd come," Raina murmured under her breath. Maya turned to her, brows raised. "What did you do?" Raina didn't answer. Inside, the center buzzed with life. Children of all ages and physical abilities moved across the floor in free-form steps. Some in wheelchairs, some with prosthetics, others using walkers or crutches. A soft beat played through overhead speakers. The energy was chaotic, yet alive, filled with clumsy attempts and unpolished joy. "Mr. Ellison," Raina greeted as she approached, now wearing a simple T-shirt with the Liberty Motion logo. Welcome. Micah looked around wide-eyed. A girl spun her wheelchair in circles to the rhythm. A boy with a prosthetic limb created a pattern of hops and pivots. It was nothing like the sterile rehabilitation clinics he was used to. It looks chaotic, Harrison said, clearly uncomfortable. There's structure, Raina replied calmly. Just not the kind you recognize. She turned to Micah. Would you like to join them? Micah nodded slowly. But then he looked at his father. Go ahead, Harrison said, his voice tight. I'll be right here. Raina guided Micah into the room while Maya offered Harrison a seat. The first day's always the hardest, Maya said, her voice kind. For the parents, not the kids. This isn't therapy, Harrison muttered. I've hired the best rehabilitation experts in the country. And how has that been working for Micah? Maya asked softly. Harrison didn't reply. Just then, the studio door opened again. An older woman entered, leaning on a wooden cane with intricate carvings. Her gray hair was braided elegantly, her presence dignified and commanding. That's Dr. Celeste Langford, Maya whispered. Neuroscientist. Retired from Stanford. Pioneer in neuroplasticity research. Dr. Langford greeted several children before her gaze landed on Harrison. She approached him without hesitation. Mr. Ellison, she said coolly. You've rejected my research proposals 3 times in the past 2 years. Harrison blinked. Dr. Langford, I didn't expect to see you here. I oversee the research program at Liberty Motion, she said. We're studying how non-directive movement impacts neural reconfiguration in children with motor challenges. Research? Harrison frowned. I thought this was just community dance. Raina had returned by then, standing behind him. It's more than dance. Liberty Motion is a pilot program in motor rehabilitation built on autonomy and adaptive movement. Every session is guided by principles of self-agency. Then why are you working as a waitress? He asked. If you're leading a research program? Because we don't have adequate funding, Raina said. And because people like you turned us down 3 times. Something shifted in Harrison's eyes. You were Dr. Langford's assistant? Co-author, Dr. Langford corrected. She had to leave grad school to take care of her sister, she added. But her theoretical work is groundbreaking. Harrison exhaled. You knew who I was that night. At the restaurant. From the moment you walked in, Raina said. And when Micah stood up to dance, I saw an opportunity to show, not tell. Was it staged? He asked, suspicious. Absolutely not. Micah chose to dance. I chose to follow. Just then, the door opened again and a group of reporters walked in, cameras in hand. Harrison tensed instantly. What is this? Part 2 of the plan, Raina said, almost smiling. Maya handed him a newspaper. A headline stretched across the front page. Revolutionary Rehabilitation Program shows promising results. We published our initial findings this morning, Dr. Langford explained. And we invited the press. You used my son for a media stunt? Harrison's voice turned icy. Raina didn't flinch. Instead, she motioned him into a side room. The walls were covered in photos of children before and after shots, progress stats, hand-drawn thank you notes. And at the far end of the room, a blank frame. What's that? He asked. Our future, Raina said. A real facility. One that could serve 500 kids a year instead of 50. You orchestrated all of this, Harrison said. The dance. The invite. Bringing me here on press day. Raina didn't deny it. 4 months ago, when you canceled our meeting without reading the proposal, I promised myself I'd find another way. Just then, Maya's voice cut through from the hallway. Raina, it's Micah. They rushed out. In the center of the room, the music had stopped. Everyone stood still, watching. Micah stood alone. One of his braces lay beside him on the floor. Lucas. Harrison started toward him, but Raina held him back. Wait. Micah took a deep breath. Then, wobbling but determined, he lifted his foot and took a single, unassisted step. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't clean. But it was his. The room erupted in cheers. Camera shutters clicked. Dr. Langford covered her mouth in awe. And for the first time in a long time, Harrison Ellison didn't see his son as someone broken, needing to be fixed. He saw a leader. This, Raina whispered beside him, is why we created Liberty Motion. Not to perfect steps, but to make space for the first ones. Harrison's expression crumbled. The man who had always controlled everything outcomes, employees, image was now standing in a room where he controlled nothing. Just the choice in front of him. To fight what he couldn't understand. Or to follow where his son had already begun to lead. The cameras were still rolling when Harrison Ellison stood motionless, his mind caught between the collapsing framework of his pride and the spark of something unrecognizable: humility. The image of Micah, his only child, standing on his own, taking a step without instruction, without guidance, without fear, refused to leave his mind. And now, every camera in the room turned to him. A reporter approached, microphone extended. "Mr. Ellison, would you care to comment on your presence here at Liberty Motion today? Is it true your foundation rejected this program 3 times?" Silence for a few long seconds. Harrison looked at Raina. She didn't speak. She didn't push. She just watched, calm and grounded, the same way she had followed Micah's lead days ago in that restaurant. Then something changed. "You know what's hardest?" Harrison began, speaking directly to the reporter, but loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "For someone like me?" He paused. "Admitting when we're wrong." The room fell dead silent. "The Ellison Foundation is committing to fund Liberty Motion for the next 5 years, he said, his voice steady now, "and to build a permanent rehabilitation center based on the methodology developed by Dr. Langford and Ms. Carter." Gasps. Camera flashes. Even Maya let out a stunned breath. But Harrison wasn't finished. "On one condition," he added, looking Raina square in the eye, "that Ms. Carter retain full autonomy over the program. No corporate interference." Raina blinked. She hadn't expected that. She gave a quiet nod. It was not gratitude, it was mutual understanding. 3 months later, the old community warehouse that had once hosted Liberty Motion's pilot classes was gone. Bulldozers moved across a freshly cleared lot just outside the south side, preparing the ground for something bigger, something transformative. A new Liberty Motion Rehabilitation Center. The design wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was revolutionary. Every hallway, every room, every piece of equipment had been co-designed by the children and their families. It didn't just accommodate them, it was built for them. Raina visited the site daily, clipboard in hand. But she was never alone. Micah came too. Sometimes he brought other kids with him, showing them the layout, explaining the activity zones like a tour guide with personal investment. The staff quickly learned that Micah wasn't just a student, he was becoming an advocate. And Harrison? He showed up more than anyone expected. Not with speeches or grand gestures. He didn't bring a camera crew or wear suits. Just khakis, notebooks, and questions. One afternoon, as Raina reviewed structural blueprints in one of the open-frame rooms, Harrison walked in holding a worn manila folder thick with notes and scientific articles. "I never thought I'd see the day you'd attend design meetings," Raina joked. "I never thought I'd have to study neuroplasticity at 50, Harrison replied, rubbing his temple. The folder in his hand was covered with post-it notes, scribbled highlights, underlined terms. He was trying. That much was clear. They sat down at a temporary fold-out table with architectural plans spread between them. "Is this public penance?" Raina asked after a beat. "Or do you really care?" "Micah asked to have his second brace removed last week," Harrison said, his tone soft. "I know," Raina smiled. "He told me. His old physical therapist said that wouldn't be possible for 2 more years. You fired her," Raina reminded him. "Because you told me she was wrong." "She was," Raina said. Then she pointed at a photo tacked to a corkboard, Micah standing tall, with just one crutch. "And you have proof." A silence settled between them. Not heavy, not strained. It was the kind of silence that lives between people learning to trust one another. Then Harrison asked something unexpected. "Why did you never accept my apology?" Raina didn't look away. "Because you never gave one. I redirected funding. I changed policies. I gave you control." "That's not an apology," she said gently. "That's compensation." Harrison nodded slowly. "Fair." 6 months later, the center opened its doors. The contrast from that first night in Langston Hall was unrecognizable. The new Liberty Motion Center buzzed with children in wheelchairs, braces, walking aids, prosthetics, and no one stared. No one judged. Because here, everyone moved freely. In the center of the main hall, Micah led a simple choreography with 3 other kids. His legs still carried a lightweight brace, but his posture radiated confidence. His movements, though measured, flowed with a purpose that had nothing to do with therapy and everything to do with ownership. Harrison stood off to the side, watching but not interfering. "He doesn't need you to hold him anymore," Raina said softly, joining him. "No," Harrison nodded. "But he still needs me around." They stood side by side. "Thank you," he said suddenly. For what exactly? Raina asked. For teaching me to follow. A reporter approached. Mr. Ellison, how does it feel seeing your son lead others now? Harrison looked over at Micah, who was helping a younger girl steady herself on a balance rail. Proud, he said. Not just for what he's overcome, but for what he's created. And what's the biggest lesson you've learned on this journey? He paused, then turned to the camera with clarity in his voice. That leadership isn't about pulling people forward, it's about recognizing when someone else is ready to lead, and having the courage to step aside. A year had passed. In that time, the name Liberty Motion had evolved from a local initiative into a national model. 3 new centers had opened in cities across the Midwest. Clinics and hospitals began adopting their principles. And one particular story, a boy, a waitress, and a single dance had become symbolic of a different kind of rehabilitation. One based not on fixing bodies, but freeing spirits. At the National Pediatric Rehabilitation Conference held in Denver, Raina Carter was honored with the Innovation in Therapy Award. She accepted it wearing the same modest dress she'd worn the day she first walked into Harrison Ellison's office. But now, the audience stood to applaud. Later that same month, Micah officially enrolled in regular school for the first time since his accident. He still used a light cane on difficult days, but more often than not, he walked unaided. And more than that, he began speaking publicly about his journey. The boy who once trembled under scrutiny was now standing in front of classrooms, sharing what it meant to take your first step on your own terms. Meanwhile, Harrison Ellison, the man once defined solely by his empire, was going through a quiet transformation of his own. He still wore tailored suits, still signed contracts worth millions. But now, he sat in Liberty Motion board meetings, not to dictate, but to listen. He read neuroscience journals. He asked questions. He let others speak first. And one afternoon, in the newly finished garden outside the Chicago Flagship Center, he asked Raina something that had been growing inside him like a thorn. Do you think Micah forgives me? He said, eyes not meeting hers. Raina looked up from the bench where they both sat, watching children practice outside. I think he stopped waiting for your permission to move forward, she said. And maybe that's the best kind of forgiveness. Harrison didn't respond right away. His gaze lingered on a young girl balancing on one leg while holding the hand of another child for support. You were right, he said softly. He didn't need more experts. He needed space, autonomy, someone to follow him. Raina nodded. It's hard, isn't it? Letting go of control. Harder than earning it in the first place, he admitted. She smiled faintly. And yet you did. Their conversation was interrupted by Maya, Raina's sister, rushing toward them from inside the center, her tablet in hand. Come quickly, she said. Something's happening. Inside the main studio, the lights were dimmed. Music played low. A group of children were circled around Micah. In the center, he stood facing the mirrored wall. His breathing was focused, deliberate. Then, with the faintest movement, he removed the cane from his right hand and passed it to another child. Gasps filled the room. Raina's hands instinctively gripped the railing, but she didn't move. Micah closed his eyes and took a full, balanced step. No brace, no cane, no assistance. His foot planted firmly, and then he took another. The room didn't erupt in cheers this time. It stayed quiet, because everyone knew they were witnessing something sacred. The children stood in reverent silence. A few adults turned away to wipe tears. And Harrison Ellison, man of control, precision, and power, was no longer a CEO watching a performance. He was a father, watching his son break free of everything physical, emotional, systemic that had held him back. I thought he wouldn't walk again, Harrison whispered. You were told he wouldn't, Raina replied. By people who only looked at charts. And you? I looked at him. Cameras flashed. Reporters who happened to be visiting for a follow-up story suddenly found themselves in the presence of something bigger than a headline. One of them approached Harrison again. Mr. Ellison, would you say this program has achieved what it set out to do? He looked at Raina, then at Micah, then at the room filled with movement, laughter, joy, and choice. No, he said. It's done more. And what would you say is the secret to that success? Harrison turned back to the camera with a quiet intensity. That the best help is sometimes the help that steps aside. And with that, he excused himself, walking toward his son, not to pick him up, or guide him, or hold his hand, but just to stand next to him. Micah looked up, smiled, and nodded. A silent signal. an understanding that no words could express. In the heart of Chicago's South Side, the new Liberty Motion Rehabilitation Center stood tall not as a monument to wealth, but as a living, breathing ecosystem of hope. Its walls were painted in vibrant colors chosen by the children themselves. Its ramps curved gracefully between glass walls. Its rooms carried names like the First Step Room, Momentum Hall, and the Connection Studio, each one a tribute to stories like Micah's. And at the entrance, engraved into a silver plaque, were three names: Dr. Celeste Langford, Raina Carter, Micah Ellison. What had started with a single act of kindness in a luxury restaurant had become a national blueprint for what inclusive healing could look like. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, children from all across the city, some in wheelchairs, others on braces, a few with walkers, arrived with excitement in their eyes. They weren't coming for therapy. They were coming to dance, to create, to lead. And Micah? He didn't just attend. He belonged. He now served as a peer mentor, guiding other kids through their first steps, not with instruction, but with presence. He knew what it meant to be watched, judged, underestimated. So he let the others move on their own, always nearby, never intrusive. He was no longer the boy in the braces. He was now the kid who showed you how to believe in your body again. One crisp October morning, a reporter from a national magazine visited the center to do a feature on its success. She asked Micah what made Liberty Motion different from all the other places he had tried before. He thought for a moment, then said, "Here, no one tells you how to move. They ask how you want to." That quote went viral. By year's end, Liberty Motion was featured in the New York Times, Forbes, and Good Morning America. Donations poured in. 3 more cities broke ground for new centers. Pediatric hospitals requested training in the Liberty Method. But for Raina Carter, the recognition wasn't the reward. It was watching a boy who had once been told he'd never lead a dance become a leader in life. In her tiny Bronx apartment, still humble despite the success, Raina kept a notebook beneath her bed. In it were scribbled thoughts, session notes, behavioral observations, and reflections. The first page simply read, "Follow, not lead. And when they are ready, get out of the way." One Friday evening, as she packed up the studio, Harrison Ellison approached her. He wasn't wearing a suit. He rarely did these days. He held out a folder with legal papers. "It's done," he said. "What is?" Raina asked. "I've transferred full ownership of Liberty Motion to you and the board. I'll remain as a donor, but from here on out, this place belongs to the people who built it." Raina stared at him, silent. "I've spent most of my life acquiring things," Harrison said, voice low. "Companies, properties, people, if I'm being honest. But this is the first time I've let something go and felt free." She took the folder and nodded. "You did something bigger than build a center," she said. "You let go of who you thought you had to be." Micah ran past them, laughing with another child. He paused long enough to flash a smile at his dad, then vanished into the gym. Harrison watched him, eyes full. "He doesn't need me to guide him anymore." "No," Raina agreed. "But he still needs you to witness him." "And what about you?" he asked. "After all this, what's next?" Raina smiled, thoughtful. "I want to train others. Share the method. Make sure Liberty Motion outlives all of us." "And the dancing?" "I'll always dance. Just maybe not in restaurants," she grinned. They laughed, 2 people who had once stood on opposite ends of a social chasm, now sharing a quiet understanding born not of titles or contracts, but of transformation. As they walked toward the exit, the lights dimmed behind them. The laughter of children echoed through the halls. On the far wall, beneath the center's logo, someone had painted a new phrase in bold letters: "Some steps change direction. Others change lives." That weekend, Micah was asked to give a speech at a fundraising gala. He stepped up to the podium with his cane tucked under his arm, not leaning on it, just holding it like a reminder of the journey. "They once told me I wouldn't walk again," he began. "But they were wrong. Not because I proved them wrong, but because someone let me try." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "And that's the secret. Don't fix us. Don't pity us. Just walk beside us. And if we stumble, wait. We'll take the step in our time." The audience rose in a standing ovation. And in that moment, it became clear, this wasn't just Micah's legacy, or Raina's, or Harrison's. It was ours, a reminder that no matter where we come from, or how broken we think we are, a single gesture of dignity can ignite a revolution. One step, one person, one dance. If this story moved you, Don't let it stop at your screen. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that honor courage, compassion, and quiet revolutions. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded. Real change doesn't start with money or power, it starts with empathy. And most importantly, be the person who follows until someone else learns to lead. Because sometimes, the step that changes the world is the one you take together.